Welcome, everyone, coming to you live from University Circle in Cleveland, Ohio. We've got our MEM alumni panel tonight and sponsored by the Case Alumni Association. So I'd say thanks to Kelly Hendricks, special shout out to Case Alumni Association for sponsoring this event. My name is Chris Lippman. I am the Executive Director for the Office of Professional Programs at Case School of Engineering. And I have the honor of introducing Anushka Mehta, who's our moderator this evening. Anushka is a current MEM student in the 2022 cohort, which graduates this spring. And she also has her BS in chemical engineering from Case. And Anushka has accepted an offer with RMS Consulting in Chicago, and she'll be moving there this summer to begin working on their ERP team as a technology consultant. So with that, I want to say, congratulations, Anushka, once again. But with that, I will hand it off to Anushka and let you take it away. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Chris. And first off, I want to say thank you to everyone who has decided to join us tonight for this discussion. When we think about it, the pandemic really flipped the world upside down. And although COVID-19 has become less of an everyday thought, the repercussions seem to be everlasting. I think this is especially relevant in terms of the workplace, and buzzwords like virtual events and hybrid or remote work have become part of everyday lexicon. So to address the new norms in workplace culture and where these changes may lead, I would like to introduce our panel of experts, all of whom are graduates from Case Western's Master of Engineering and Management program. To start off, first, we have Tawny Bragg. Tawny graduated from the MEM program in 2012 and currently works as an advisor at CVS Health for specialty account management. Hi, Tawny, thanks for joining us. Would you like to share a fun fact with all of us?
Hello, thanks for having me. Fun fact, so when I was little, I was left-handed, and being the person that I was back then, I was climbing a tree, fell down, broke my finger, and I've been right-handed ever since. I had to figure out how to do things with the right, and I've been right-handed ever since. But every now and then, I'll still use my left just to see if I can still write legibly, and I can, so.
Wow, so I feel like ambidextrous people are very rare, so now I can say that I know one, so. Awesome, well, thanks for joining us, Tawny. Next up, we have Adam Snyder. Adam graduated from the MEM program in 2003 and is currently a managing director for sector partnership at Magnet, which is also known as the Manufacturing Advocacy and Growth Network. In addition to that, Adam is also the board chair of the MEM program's corporate advisory board. Hi, Adam. Thanks for joining us. What's your fun fact?
Good evening. I'm going to embrace how long ago 2003 sounds and share that my fun fact is I actually have the oldest MEM child. My 15-year-old was the first child born of an MEM graduate.
Wow. You will go down in history for that now. Well, thanks for joining us, Adam. And our third panelist is Matt Davis. Matt graduated from the MEM program in 2013 and currently works at Parker Hannifin as a regional manager for the Fluid Power Division. Hey, Matt, how are you doing? And what would you like to share with us?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm on the road here, but excited to be participating. Fun fact about me, I grew up in LA, and as part of that, there's, the industry, quote unquote. So had the experience of being on a game show back in the day when I was younger. So fun, exciting thing that you don't always get to do.
Wow, what game show was it?
It's since been canceled, but it was called The Big Moment. So if anybody's curious, go ahead and look it up.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah.
And then last but not least is Abdu Ayub. Uptiv graduated from the MEM program in 2005 and is the founder and managing director of Paragon Shift, a technology advisory company. Hi, Uptiv, thanks for joining us. And what
Hi,
is your
Anushka. So during COVID, pre-COVID, I used to do quite a bit of traveling. And during COVID, being grounded, not spending any time in airplanes, I decided to change that. And I studied for my private pilot license, and I have officially become a private pilot.
Wow. So have you flown anywhere yet?
Domestically, yes. So I can, I'm certified to fly anything that's a single engine up to 5 seats.
Wow, that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us.
Mhm.
And as we begin this discussion, for all of our attendees, please feel free to drop any relevant questions you may have for our panelists in the chat. So now to start off, I want to take us all back to really the beginning of the pandemic, the beginning of the lockdown. You know, before that, you probably went to work, 9 to 5 or whatever your hours may be. And you came home and the next day you realized that who knows when the next time you'll be going back to your office will be. So I guess my question was that with that is, how did the four of you adapt to an at-home work environment, and how did you handle the stress that came with that?
I'll take, go ahead.
Yeah, so in the role that I have was kind of hybrid initially. So I would be in the office for 3 days, and then a couple of days out of the week I could work from home. So for me, it was kind of seamless. The main thing for me was that I had a 15-month-old at the time. And so my husband and I were literally about to put him into a daycare, and then everything shut down. So I had one of my aunts, who's a teacher, kind of retired, and I tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Hey, do you want to watch your great nephew for how long? I don't know, but we would really appreciate it." So that for me was the only difference. I had a 15-month-old running around trying to conduct meetings. My husband, his office is based in Cleveland, but he works remote. So we only had one office at the time because he was the main person, home. So here we are trying to figure out, well, where are you going to go? Where are you going to work? And the baby's crying. And now that I'm home, he's like, well, mommy, I want to go to you. I don't want to go to auntie. So that for me was the biggest difference.
Matt, I know you were gonna say something too.
Yeah, for me, I'm in a business development sales management role. So it wasn't really a change from the norm from a work from home standpoint, because I had already been working remotely. It was really a change in how we engage the customer. When you go from, the norm is face-to-face meetings, going in and out of your different customers, working directly with their teams, to having to work all remotely, you just have to adjust your engagement and really the cadence in which you're working with all your different, customers, distributors, etc. So that was the biggest challenge, was trying to remain effective while having really just virtual communication.
So I think professionally, I had some similar things to Matt. I had gotten used to back-to-back meetings with tight travel times in between, and then it shifted to, okay, 7:30 or 8 till 5 or 5:30, back to back with no gaps. And that it's just a different tired and a different exhausted that I'm guessing everybody on the panel and the attendees have come to feel. So for me, like the second part of your question of how to handle that stress, I felt like I had to get really intentional about, okay, I've been on Zoom for 55, 60 hours this week. I've got to find time to work out. I've got to switch one of these to a phone call and pace in the backyard while I'm talking or something, just to counteract whatever long-term psychological effects we're all going to feel from being on Zoom more than we were sleeping, eating, or doing anything else for a couple of years.
Yeah, actually, to kind of go off of that, I was talking to one of my future coworkers, and I was asking her about how many hours she's been working, and she was like, well, during the pandemic, I used to work 50 to 55 hours because I had nothing else to do and I was just at home. And she was like, my team lead sat me down one day and he was like, what are you doing? Like, you haven't even taken a day off the entire year you've been working. So I guess with that, I was wondering if any of you have any advice for someone who's trying to set those boundaries. I know my coworker, she said she started doing gym classes. So if she would have a gym class at 6 p.m., she'd be like, I have to make it. So, I'm shutting down for the day. But do you guys have any other tips?
Yeah, try to get a routine and regular sleep schedule. For me, it's the three main categories in importance are sleep, diet, and fitness. And making sure that you have those balanced out, because as Adam said, you will have a million Zoom or Teams meetings every week. And it's not just, mental, it's not just physical, it's how they work together that ultimately will help you to, lessen your stress, be able to accomplish what you need to do and feel like you actually have a proper work-life balance, as we all sort of adjust to this new way of going to work, really.
It's interesting that Matt starts with the sleep factor. So when you asked about how it started, exactly 2 years ago, I guess now, my routine used to be 6 weeks in North America and then 6 weeks in the Middle East. And I'd go back and forth between the two. I was in the US for a client over here. I had put in an order for a car, actually Canadian, so I had to pick it up from Toronto, rented a car, crossed the border to pick up my new car, and they shut the border. And they made the call and they said, Canadians have to stay north of the border and Americans have to stay south of the border. So I had to get an Airbnb, and all of a sudden, Toronto became home in a very unscheduled fashion. And then for all the clients that I used to do work with in the Middle East, my time zone sort of shifted. So I would start my days at about 3 or 4 in the morning and then go through. So at the beginning of the pandemic, to Matt's point, there was not a whole lot of sleep and there was not a whole lot of discipline around sleep. And eventually it sort of catches up with you. Some of the things that helped me work through it is similar to when Adam was talking about switching the calls over to walks and pacing. The apartment I was in across the street, there was a high school that had a track. So I would just get my earphones in and I started measuring my conference calls, not in minutes, but in kilometers. So this was a 5K conference call. This was a 3K conference call, sort of changed the KPI a little bit. In order to get some activity in.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know, just from taking class all day long, sitting in a chair, even I lost that time actually walking to class. So I felt like I was sitting in a chair all day long. So I definitely had to, get up, get out, and, walks. I think that was a thing that everyone did during the pandemic. So I can relate to that as well. I guess my next question is more on how do you stay focused at home? When I think about it, I'm thinking about, you have Zoom meetings or Microsoft Team meetings. Are people's cameras turned off? How do you know that they're paying attention? How do you lead meetings and make sure that you're actually being heard, I guess?
I think there was a lot of chaos at the beginning of people figuring out what the social norms were going to be. And is it embarrassing to have your kids walk in through the doorway behind you? Is that just how things are going? What times a day does each of your teammates' lives get hectic? I think at this point, at least for the circles within my team and partner teams, I think one of the nice things is that we all have a better understanding of our personal lives and where those interact. And for me, my team, I know that for me, if I'm Zooming all day, after the rest of my family's in bed, that's when I do emails or like need to put my head down. That 9 to midnight window is good for my brain. And my team knows that, but they also know I don't expect them to respond to emails. And there's one person on my team who, if they don't have to engage till 9:30 or so, that's helpful for their like kids and pets and all that. So I think there's some kind of norming with each team and being transparent and vulnerable about, hey, here's what works best for me, for my family, and that balance. But the one piece of advice I would give folks either that are on here or watch the recording is, until you have those norms figured out, you have to default to camera on. You have to default to making eye contact as best as possible, and people are looking at you even more intently than if you were in a conference room. So if you're putting your professional persona forward, not having your camera on, people are going to question whether you're engaged. And if you're even something as simple as you have a second monitor and you're looking up here, people are going to wonder if you're watching TV or gazing out the window. So I think if you default to, I'm here, best practice Zoom video, and then work through that with your core team, that was something that I think some of us figured out quick. Some of us figured out the hard way because people would start asking if you were actually on and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would say at the start of the pandemic, everybody kind of had their camera on. We were still trying to, connect with each other and see, everybody's face. But as we were, continuing on through the pandemic, I could tell, people were probably wanted to do other things, and then they kind of, just discreetly turned the camera off. You're kind of wondering like, oh, what are they doing? But moving forward, we would say, if I'm setting a meeting and I expect to see everybody on camera, I would put that in the subject. Hey, this is the meeting title, cameras on. So they would know. Otherwise, it was kind of okay for you to, keep your cameras off. You can tell when people are engaged if they, have questions, comments, kind of thing. But that was kind of what I experienced.
I think for me, ever since the pandemic started and even up till now, I tend to do camera on, and sometimes it takes a little bit more to just stay there, stay engaged when you really just need a break after doing 8 or 9 hours of Zoom. But I feel it keeps the other people engaged even if they don't have their camera on, rather than having just a series of no boxes or being on a conference call. This tends to be just a bit more engaging. It's definitely more comfortable on my side if I see the faces. I have learned to not ask, or push rather. We would ask in case the meeting requires it. So if it's something that's with a client, then I would definitely ask my team to be on. Even if the client doesn't want to be, we are. I'll ask my team in that context. If this is an internal meeting, if you come to a point where you have to understand people's preferences are different, people's bandwidth is different, so you have to be pretty flexible with that. So that's been the mechanism, at least on my side.
And I'd like to get one thing in here. 9 times out of 10, I have my camera on. If I weren't driving, I would totally totally be on camera right now. But that's absolutely true. It's about trying to feel engagement on both ends of, or anyone that's participating in the meeting typically. And to answer the first part of your question, working from home and being able to separate it from your personal life is a difficult thing, as I think a few of us have mentioned. For me personally, I need to have a dedicated space in my house that I can go to that is separate from my personal belongings and potential distractions on a day-to-day basis, because they're rare, or they're there. And we all fail at some point. So just having a dedicated space for me really allowed me to be productive on a day in, day out basis, and achieve sort of a better work-life balance too, in a way, because I could separate work even at home from, personal life. I could shut down the computer, walk out of my office and, go cook dinner, for instance, and, mentally separate it, check out, and, refresh and get ready for the next day.
Awesome. Yeah, Matt, I think you're kind of touching on the fact that, being at home, it isn't all bad, it isn't all stressful. So I guess my next question is, what were some of the aspects that you did enjoy about being at home?
The commute to work every day, if I'm being honest, not having go in the office. Now there's tons of pluses, I think, in going to the office, but I think, there's also, you save on gas, you save on being stuck in traffic every day. So some, just some little things, and I think that add up on a, day in, day out basis.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. My office is about an hour away from where I live. And if there's an accident or, it's raining too hard, traffic can be tough. So definitely working from home helped as far as, time, number one, gas. My husband and I, we actually got rid of one of our cars because we were like, we're not going anywhere. So why have that cost? But I would say also, being with my, my kid is home. So I can immediately, as soon as I shut down, I can go right to him. I can, prep dinner, meal prep, or work out if I know I didn't get it in during my kind of lunch break. I know as soon as I shut the laptop, I can go over here, get my workout in at home, or, go to the gym, whatever I want to do. So that was definitely a benefit. Waking up a little bit, early, but not as early as I was waking up to get, to the office was also pretty good for me. So it had its benefits.
I think for me, the two main points, a healthier diet, because there was a lot less eating out and a lot more home cooked meals. And the saving on the commute, in my case, it was all the delays of sitting on the tarmac and waiting for delayed flights. So there was a lot of hours that were saved from spending time in airports with the travel back and forth.
I'd say some similar. I think being able to be engaged through the course of the day with the family as they were home, like on summer vacation or breaks or something, and meeting ends 10 minutes early, it's kind of cool to be able to go in and say hi or help fix kids' lunch or something like that. And it actually broke. My wife and I had been stalemated for a good decade on whether or not to get a puppy and what kind. And I think she finally saw an opportunity, like, oh, I don't have to bear the burden of this all day. If you're home and can walk the dog, and as it turns out, the dog just spends the whole day on my lap or next to me while I'm Zooming. So that was a nice add to the family because I was working from home.
Yeah, I totally agree with that sentiment. I never thought as a college student I would have the opportunity to live with my parents for 6 months during the school year. So I thought it was pretty nice. Unfortunately, I didn't get a puppy. I tried, but hey, maybe when I move out. We have a great question from the audience. And I think networking is super important. So this kind of plays into that. But were you able to develop new contacts during the pandemic, or were you dependent on the contacts that you had already made?
I would say professional network and new contacts, new customers and stuff didn't slow down, at least in my work. If anything, there was a period where it sped up. I think the weird part is now having had deep professional interactions over the span of 2 years, and never having met those people until the last couple of months is odd. But networking in itself, I think, definitely struggled. Even just noticing how thirsty people are for like the chit chat before and after meetings. Now that more of them are in person, that wasn't happening when everybody arrives on a Zoom within like a 30-second window, and then the Zoom room closes. I think that from a broadness of network, I don't think I missed out on much, but from a depth of relationship and personal connection, it was definitely a struggle.
Yeah, to Adam's point, the work doesn't slow down. The opportunities don't go away. And for me, I've had, 2 different positions throughout the entire pandemic, and my network has absolutely grown over that time. And the amount of people that I've gotten to meet, even if virtually. And it is funny how you go from, as Adam said, meeting people just strictly online to in person. And you notice, subtle things that are just different. And I think that speaks to the fact that, as we come back into, somewhat of a more, normal or previous state, that we see the value in both having virtual based meetings and then the value of having in-person meetings. And we can use those a bit more interchangeably moving forward, and understanding that not everything has to be in person or not everything has to be virtual, and, understanding, when to use which, and how to make sure that that's making, our teams more efficient in new and different ways has been extremely valuable.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I guess a follow-up question to that is, for example, if you had new employees or you were onboarding new associates during the pandemic, how did that work? Was that more difficult?
It definitely was, especially when you're starting with somebody new and you don't know what their preferences are. Do you ask them to come into the office, or do you not ask them to come into the office to start with, at least for a day or two? In our case, we gave them the option, at least for the first week or so, just to come in. So there's a face and, some, not just Zoom, but some contact to get going, so they understand who the team is. And then from there on, we really left it up to them to sort of decide what they want to do. There were certain situations when somebody got sick, we had to shut down the office for 2 weeks. Absolute no, nobody's coming into the office in that case. But just from an onboarding point of view, we made sure we gave people the option. And we had people that preferred to come in to work from the office. They needed that separation to come in, and so it was there.
Yeah, so for my team, people who onboarded, everything was virtual. We didn't even have an option to come into the office. Our office was completely shut down. So within my department, though, we have like a team of 10 maybe, and they would historically put on different kind of activities to kind of bring everybody together. So now they were kind of tasked with, what do we do virtually to make sure people still, get to know the new hires, they can get to know us. So it kind of turned to, a virtual environment. We had, surveys, but they were done, in a fun way. We would, have cameras on for sure when we did these kind of activities. So it kind of helped to get to know one another. Until things kind of opened up, and then we can have like a face-to-face event, which we went to a baseball game. So that was fun. But initially everything was kind of virtual.
Yeah, I think the most challenging part with new hires, and you touched on the point, is making them feel like they're a part of the team, or that they see the culture of the company, and sort of sustaining that. So ensuring that you have good engagement, that people feel like they belong, that they matter, and that they're working toward this shared goal and this why that every, I think, organization should be able to formulate. And working virtually, it's a bit more difficult to achieve that. So definitely something that that we as an organization have been challenged with. But trying to do things like, as you said, events like baseball games, or now I don't know, little get-togethers or lunches, things like that, all help to build that puzzle. But certainly for a while when we were locked down, making folks feel belonged was definitely an obstacle.
Yes, as someone who's joining the workforce post-pandemic and moving to a city that I don't know anyone who lives in, I'm relying on my coworkers to be my friends, at least for the first couple of weeks. So I think I'm definitely going to be, navigating that environment where, it's hybrid, and, how am I going to connect with those coworkers? So I think, everything that you guys have said is very, very helpful. Another question that we got is, do any of the panelists see reluctance or opposition to returning to a traditional office work environment among their teams? And is there, I guess, a breakdown of those feelings based on job type, age, or career level that you've been noticing?
I think my observation in my business and partners and other leader forums that I'm in is that every business is working to figure out what that looks like long term, and that every individual, every role, every department, every company is somewhat unique, and it's, in some ways, I'm liking, it's forcing, early on there were some trends of a lot of my friends that or maybe that would classify themselves as boomers or like older execs are like, I want everybody to come back into the office because that's how we do business. And they would get frustrated when young people were like, but I like this. This actually works for me better. So I think it's forcing some of the intergenerational preference conversations. I think it's forcing some good, do we have to do it this way? Can we improve? Can our culture be strong, but also provide flexibility and a different work-life balance model than what work-life balance was considered before? So if everybody's embracing it in that way, I think it's a positive, but it's definitely changes hard in some ways every time.
For us, I think I have two answers for this. One is sort of internal team, and one is what we're seeing with our clients. From an internal team point of view, we haven't considered the option of forcing or insisting on people to come back. This hybrid model has proven to work, not locally, internationally, globally, right? So I've got a team that's based in Beirut, we've got a team that's in the US, and we're doing this. It's been working for a couple of years. Was it a bit challenging at the beginning? Yep. Do we have it down? It's working right now. We've got a system. So would we want to get to the point, we've discussed this quite a bit, sort of force people to come back? I don't think so. I don't see it for us. It doesn't make sense. Not necessarily the same sentiment when it comes to how, at least some of the conversations that we're having with our clients in an unofficial conversation, not for us as consultants for those clients, but rather within that client environment. A lot of times we're seeing people are hesitant for multiple reasons, like all the positive reasons of staying home, being close to the family, and if nothing else, the cost element, right? So today, if you have to drive an hour to get to work, that's about 60 miles each way. That's 120 a day, 600 miles a week, 2,400 miles a month. That's a lot of miles. That's a lot of gas. That's a lot of wear and tear on your car. Well, if over the past 2 years, you've managed to do the work without putting in the commute time and the expense, the mindset has changed, because people are saying now, should my company start giving me transportation allowance? Because what used to be taken for granted before, that you have to commute to work, well, for the past 2 years, you've proven that you can do it without commuting. Now the going into the office has almost become the above and beyond. It's the additional cost that's being incurred. It's no longer the baseline. And those are some of the arguments, or that we hear the clients talking with their management team to say, do we really need to do this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question that pops up when we're interviewing, just about every candidate. Within the first 5 questions, in some form or fashion, it's always, do you allow work from home? Do you have a flex schedule? Is there some sort of work from home policy that's been formulated? And as everyone said, we're figuring it out, but we see the value in it. Now, the other thing I would add is that as an engineering and manufacturing company, it is also function dependent. There are some positions that absolutely need to be, in brick and mortar, from in a manufacturing assembly standpoint, but it's not every position, right? So then you're also thinking about, how does that affect the culture at my organization when, some employees see that, there's folks that don't have to report in and they're coming in every day. So how do you fix it so that they feel like they're whole, like they're valued, and that they're getting that benefit for that increased cost, whether it's travel or, just time spent at work, or, having to eat out or whatever it is. And adjusting that and making sure that, the entire organization feels like, the company values their efforts. So it's certainly something I think we're going to continue to develop, but in my opinion, it's definitely here to stay.
Yeah, I know, Matt, you just brought that up. So I guess one of my other questions was, have you actually seen how, equity is being dealt with, with upper management versus essential workers who have to come in? Because upper management, they don't have to, so they can work with them. So is there something currently that's being done to kind of be equitable?
Yeah, absolutely. On our end, we've increased the benefits and the bonuses that folks that are, essential workers within our manufacturing facilities. And, there are things that, the office workers, would not necessarily get that are not the same. So trying to balance that out has been a continuous process for us, and having, multiple divisions, multiple operating locations across multiple countries. And then also the rules and regulations that are in place in all those different places as well, really has been a full team effort. So we've really increased our HR team across the board, and creating, new bonuses and new policies for folks is certainly something that we are looking to get better at and are, enacting right now.
Yeah, I would say, working at CVS, obviously our retail pharmacists are right there on the front lines. Just kind of how Matt mentioned, we did implement a bonus for those essential workers who are, helping patients, on the front lines. For the folks that were, not essential workers, they get the benefit of the flexibility working from home, having that option. So nothing has really been giving in addition to those team members, but trying to kind of, balance out the morale. I think recently they also extended giving the pharmacists an additional break during the day, because you'd be surprised, like you go in to pick up your prescriptions, you don't even think that, these pharmacists may not even get to step away and grab lunch. They're cranking out scripts, constantly. So they just, implemented that additional break throughout the day. And I think that has gone over tremendously well. So trying to figure out the balance is something, that my company is still working on, but it's a evolving process, I guess.
I guess kind of going off of that, essential workers are getting, more benefits. Do you think that sometimes, management is being left behind, especially with the Great Resignation, and so many people are leaving and they're trying to incentivize, positions like, for example, my mom works at a bank. They're trying to incentivize tellers to, keep working there. They're getting bonuses, but people in management, they're having to work, as they used to in the bank, but they're not getting the same incentives. Is that something that you've noticed?
I think there's some dependence on what industry and what segment and function. I've got some family members and friends that are in that type of a role in healthcare. And that's been a rough go for the last 2 years. It was a tough job before, but with PCAs, STNAs, nurses being so short, nurse managers that's a tough spot. And I think when you look at some of those industries, supervision and middle management and manufacturing has been super stressed with talent shortages plus industry growth. I think there's also an interesting timing element to that, where the folks that are doing well with it, there's potential acceleration for them in this couple of years from a career trajectory standpoint. But no doubt stress levels in certain aspects of that supervisor to middle management level have been running really high, and exhaustion is something that executive leadership has been having to watch really closely.
Yeah, you brought up a key word there in my mind, and or the key phrase, right? The Great Resignation. I think people are realizing that whether it's their work-life balance was off, or the passion for what they're doing has changed, and it's different than it was before, and it wasn't what they signed up to do. There's a lot of fluidity now, and I think it's an issue we're not going to resolve anytime soon, but one in which that we're sort of seeing a new just way of going about everything in my mind. So I think it goes back to having a good work-life balance, understanding the why, and working and understanding the purpose of your company and what you're trying to achieve. And I think we'll see more stabilization if companies are better able to to speak to that, are better organized and from a community and a togetherness standpoint, and better able to communicate to their employees, and make them feel like they're part of the why in the community that they want, that they signed up to be a part of.
I think so. The two questions, be it the frontliners or be it management, I think there is a common denominator in both, and it's not about the individuals as much as the company and the culture of the company. I think it's a matter of recognition and being seen, regardless of where you are on this hierarchy. Is the company recognizing the fact that there has been a change? There's been a change in the lifestyle, there's been a change in the workload, there's been a change in the level of contribution, right? And it's about being recognized. And whether that comes in the form of a bonus or additional days off or flex work and being able to work out of the Dominican Republic, just being recognized that things have changed and having a conversation about that and saying we are willing to adapt. And we're going to have different forms of adaptation. That's a conversation by itself. But that initial question of, are we willing to adapt? Yes or no? I think at the beginning, there were a lot of companies that were hung up on that. They did not want to adapt. They did not want to change, which, going back to Matt's point, it caused people to sort of reflect inwards as to, why am I doing this, right? So there was a trend, we were living it. Now there's this shock factor that came in, and you sort of take a step back and say, all right, so I'm putting in some crazy hours. Why am I doing this? And on top of that, I'm not being recognized. So it caused people to sort of reflect internally, sort of decide, do they really want to keep doing that or not? You don't see as much of that happening in companies that manage to adapt, understand and embrace the fact that things are different, sort of had HR departments that at least tried to move, even though they may not have gotten it right the first time, but at least attempted to accommodate and tell people, hey, we hear you, we understand this is different, we're trying, let's try all together.
Yeah, I think visibility is definitely something that is a concern for management as well as employees. So someone in the audience asked, are employees concerned that if they are not physically present and seen, as we as people are coming back and they have that option, do you think that it'll affect their chances at growth and promotion in the company?
Ooh, I think that's a subjective manager decision there. You know, it's in my mind, and my take on that is, if you're producing and you're accomplishing the goals we set as a team, then no, it's not going to hurt your ability to be promoted, your ability to be seen and recognized, even if you're not in the office. So for me, it's do we understand our goals? Are you working toward those goals? Are you knocking them out of the park? Are you just getting by and scraping by with the minimum? But whether you're in-house or you're working from home, no, I think if you're hitting objectives, that's the most important thing.
But again, Matt, I think the concept, that's a very cultural thing, right? Not all companies would necessarily depend on delivery and competency. Some of them,
That's
right? They look for that.
That's true.
And to a certain point, that question I think is relevant today, just as it was a couple of years ago. Because I'll tell you, when I started out my career, I started out with Deloitte Consulting. Networking was absolutely crucial to your career. You had to be involved. You had to help with proposals. If you're not on a project, you were in the office, you were involved. Now, I think the only thing that has changed is the modality of the involvement, right? Being at home makes it much easier to disconnect. Where you're done with a project, you don't necessarily have to do that extra hour of networking with somebody or reaching out, because you've already done 6 or 7 hours of Zoom. I really don't feel like doing this for another half hour or so. So you sort of start skipping those. The staying at home makes it easy to skip them, versus if you were in the office, you'd knock on somebody's door, have a coffee with them, do a little bit of that networking. But I think the challenge is the same today as it was pre-pandemic. The mode of networking is what has changed. And I think it's important that we adapt to that, so that we maintain that cadence of networking if the culture we're in sort of requires that to keep going. You have to understand the politics of the environment that you're in and sort of adjust to that.
I think Abdu's point about understanding the environment and what is critical. If the career path that somebody is either envisioning or is on is very linear, and if I do a good job, I get promoted to be the supervisor of that job and so forth, then your visibility to the key players is also very linear. But I think there's a lot of work environments where if you're having great interactions and you're delivering on your work in a fully remote environment, you may not get the kind of the off-track conversation with a CFO that's not in that path, that then gives you some extra visibility. It may give you some extra mentoring from people that aren't in that direct line. And particularly early in a career, your ability to get involved with stuff that's out of your core direct responsibility, but is great exposure or great learning opportunities. I'd say in person or remote, you have to be intentional about it. It doesn't, I think it's less likely to happen by accident in a remote environment, because you're not in the Zoom room. There isn't a Zoom hallway where you run into folks and build relationships.
Yeah, I think Adam, the key word you said there was intentional, because whether you're in the office or not, you have to be intentional about building out your network. I know for myself, I saw a VP, a female VP. Her name was always in the conversation. She was building teams, moving up, and I'm like, I want to know her. So I've heard that she was building a separate team, trying to come up with an idea for something totally unrelated to healthcare or the product team that she was leading. So I emailed her, said, hey, I'm interested. And her and I talk all the time. Like, she's a sponsor of mine. So it really is about being intentional.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It just got me thinking, when you can't see people in person, I know as a student, a problem that I had was actually being able to hold people accountable, because it's so easy to just, ignore an email that you've been sent or a message you've been sent. And I don't know, have any of you had to like face that during the pandemic when, maybe an employee wasn't performing and you had to get something from them, but like it just couldn't happen?
I saw leaders, I saw the remote work in the pandemic alleviate some of those weaknesses with some leaders, and also make other aspects hard. Like, I think for some leaders that I was working with, having a difficult conversation by Zoom was easier than doing it one-on-one in an office. It was less intimidating, or they could kind of find their comfort zone a little easier. At the same time, those same accidental conversations around networking and growth don't happen informally. Oh, you know what? That's interesting you brought that up. We should talk about this also. Like, all of those things have to be scheduled and agendaed. And to Tawny's point, the meeting reason if anybody got let's talk with a Zoom link, that wasn't something that happened versus a pop into somebody's office during some downtime. So I think the skills and competencies from a leadership perspective shifted in a remote environment, and there wasn't really a playbook for it. From a leadership training, management training standpoint, that was something that all industries had to maneuver a bit to say, okay, what are the leadership skills that are more needed? How do we bolster that for our developing our emerging leaders?
I agree. And I think one of the big things that I noticed is the concept of communication. And I know we talk about it and we take it for granted, but there are a few points that have come up already during our session today where those were communication points we used to do pre-COVID that we can't do. So when you get on a Zoom call and you've got those 30 minutes and it's just pure work, there is no chit chat before that and after that. So when you're talking to somebody, you're walking from one meeting to another in the hallway, and somebody expresses that they're either struggling with something at home or somebody's sick. When you're in an office environment, you sort of subconsciously have those data points in the back of your mind. So if somebody's falling behind, one, you're a bit more understanding because you know what's going on. There's a lot more empathy. And then you may sit down and talk to the person about it and say, if there's too much on your plate like right now, let's see what we could do to alleviate some of that until you get your stuff together. Well, that unofficial conversation doesn't happen in the digital channels anymore unless you make it a point to happen. So with my team, we've made it a point on Fridays where we get on a call for an hour if people want to, because one of the things that I absolutely hated is when people started doing happy hours on Zoom and they would force people to show up. No, we're going to have this hour. We're going to sit down, chit chat, no work, whatever you guys want. It's an open conversation. Whether you're frustrated with a project, with a client, with whatever you want, it's just banter, right? So we're opening this Zoom call for an hour for nothing. And if you want to hop on, you want to chit chat. And what we noticed is it just allowed for a little bit those communication channels for people to vent. And the same stuff that we used to do unofficially in the office, now we could do them. Is it ideal? No, but it's much better than keeping it bottled up and not giving people a venue to just communicate that out, regardless whether good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah, well, on that note, it is now the end of the panel because it's almost 8 p.m. And I think that, based on the insightful discussion that we have had tonight, it's evident that the workplace has gone through tremendous changes during and after the lockdown. But I think only time will tell if these changes are actually here to stay. And as someone who is entering the workforce post-pandemic, I think I've learned a lot about what to expect and how to navigate this new and dynamic environment, as I'm sure, the rest of our attendees will also learn. I also just want to mention that any questions that were left unanswered will be answered via email and sent out to the attendees from tonight's discussion. And finally, I would like to thank our amazing panelists for taking the time to answer our questions and share their advice and perceptions. So with that, thank you to everyone who attended, and I hope everyone has a great evening and take care.